Hello, Shatling. Today I'm going to be explaining to you why some people with ADHD don't really get that energetic, jittery effect that a lot of people do with coffee. At least in my case, because if you don't know, I have crippling unmedicated ADHD. When I drink coffee, I don't get super energetic. I don't feel physically hyper and active, like I'm bouncing off the walls. I don't get jittery, I don't get anxious. I, in fact, ironically enough, get calmer, and it's easier for me to focus. Whereas somebody that doesn't have ADHD might get energetic. They might feel physically energetic, like they want to move their body around. They might get anxious, they might get jittery. So this difference is very interesting to me, and the explanation for it from a scientific, psychological standpoint is also super fascinating. So I'm going to explain it to you today. Also, I don't want to just be spewing bullshit, so what I did is find some studies, and I am going to use these studies in my explanation so that I know I'm not just yapping your ear off with made-up bullshit. Again, I'm not a professional, but I will be using studies so that I kind of have a rough idea of what I'm saying, and I can be like maybe 67% confident that it's true. Does that make sense? I'm excited. So first, I'm going to give you some background so that you understand the terms that I'm going to throw around. Don't worry, this probably looks like a big scary wall of text. I'm going to hold your hand and walk you through it. And I'm going to pick out a couple specific points that I want to make to you. First of all, starting out, people with ADHD often have messed up levels of two different neurotransmitters. Those two neurotransmitters are dopamine and norepinephrine. I never know how to pronounce that. I think I just nailed it though. Norepinephrine. Yeah. So, what are those two neurotransmitters? Dopamine plays a part in many different things. It is often referred to as the reward chemical, like it says right here. But it also has to do with memory, movement, motivation, mood, and attention. So, what I really focus on in this context in regards to caffeine and ADHD is the memory, motivation, mood, and attention. What does movement mean in this context? I really don't know. But what I can tell you is that people with ADHD have lower baseline dopamine levels. Meaning, if they're just chilling, if they're at homeostasis, their dopamine levels, the amount of that neurotransmitter, dopamine, in their brain is lower than it should be. Meaning, they might have issues with memory, they might have issues with motivation, like getting shit done, doing the dishes, they might have issues with mood and emotional regulation, they might have issues with paying attention, all because their baseline dopamine levels are lower than they should be. I would like to ground myself in reality with some actual evidence, so I found this website that explains the link between dopamine and ADHD. And a more scientific version of what I just said seems to be this paragraph right here. This is because ADHDers have at least one gene, which is the DRD2 gene, that doesn't work as it should. This makes it harder for the nerve cells or neurons in the brain to respond to dopamine. This part right here is also very crucial and has a lot to do with what I explained previously. However, defects in a few of these genes, the ones mentioned in the previous paragraph, you know, DRD2, whatever that means, I'm not going to pretend to know what that is. Defects in a few of these genes can have an additive effect that reduces the brain's dopamine production. This can lead to low levels of dopamine and contribute to symptoms of ADHD. So basically the things that we just listed out, the motivation, mood, memory, ironically enough, I can't remember the last one. That's dopamine. Now what about the other one? What about norepinephrine? Norepinephrine, also known as noradrenaline, is both a neurotransmitter and a hormone. It plays an important role in your body's fight or flight response. Medication, okay. So basically, it is very intertwined with the stress response, with attention, being alert, along with focus and memory. Now, you may be noticing some patterns. What's consistent in between norepinephrine and dopamine? Memory, alertness, right? Are you starting to see a connection? Because what else does that relate to? Good memory, being alert, being motivated and focused. Kind of sounds like what you try to achieve when you consume caffeine, right? also sounds like the exact things that people with ADHD struggle with. People with ADHD have a harder time paying attention, they have a harder time with memory, they have a harder time with emotional processing, and all of these things are tied to these two neurotransmitters. And just like dopamine, norepinephrine is also lower, the quantity of it is lower. It's not functioning as it should in a person with ADHD. I want to say the baseline levels are lower than they should be, or maybe it just doesn't function properly. Basically, something is wrong with norepinephrine in the brain of somebody with ADHD, just like it is with dopamine. So, are you seeing how this all ties together? Mood, concentration, motivation, alertness, focus, all of these things are tied to dopamine and norepinephrine, which, those two neurotransmitters, are funky in people with ADHD. So, this is where the fascinating part comes in. Caffeine affects dopamine and norepinephrine. Now there's one more, chemical neurotransmitter something? I think it's a neurotransmitter. Yeah. One more neurotransmitter that I must describe to you, and that is adenosine. I don't know how to pronounce it. Adenosine? This one. However you pronounce that. This is basically what makes you feel tired. Over the course of a day, it builds up what is called sleep pressure, right? Or homeostatic sleep drive. So basically, this neurotransmitter right here, adenosine, or however you say it, builds up during the day and makes you tired. It builds up more and more and more and more, which is why at the end of a long day, you're gonna feel more tired, probably, generally speaking, than at the beginning of the day, okay? That's why the longer you stay up, the more tired you are. Independent of your circadian rhythm, right? There's two factors at play when it comes to making you tired. There's your circadian rhythm, which is your internal clock, which is going to make you more tired and more alert at certain times. But there's also your sleep pressure, which is this neurotransmitter right here that keeps building up whenever you don't sleep. The longer you're awake, the more it builds up. So what caffeine does is it blocks the adenosine receptors in the brain, okay? It's I want to say reuptake inhibitor. Let me check that terminology. No, it's a receptor inhibitor. An adenosine receptor antagonist is a drug which acts as an antagonist of one or more of the adenosine receptors. Basically, what my psych teacher used to teach me is think antagonist bad. It's not helping the neurotransmitter, it's making it harder for the neurotransmitter to do its job. In this case, what is the neurotransmitter? It's adenosine. So antagonist, making it harder for adenosine to do its job, means you're going to be more awake. Because what does adenosine do? It makes you tired. Caffeine is an adenosine receptor antagonist. I'm so sorry I keep butchering the pronunciation of this word. I do not know how to pronounce it. So this chemical that builds up as you stay awake, it keeps building, 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 building. When you drink coffee, when you drink Monster, when you drink something that has caffeine in it, this tired neurotransmitter, this sleep pressure, it's blocked, it's cut off. The receptors are no longer taking in that adenosine. Therefore, you don't feel as tired. Now, the neurotransmitter isn't going anywhere. That's why you can feel a crash after you consume caffeine. However, for the time that it is functioning, for the time that it's in your system, it's going to be blocking those receptors, which is going to make you feel more alert. Now, I don't know much about adenosine and ADHD. I do know that adenosine and dopamine are quite heavily interlinked. And since dopamine is fucked up in people with ADHD, I'm sure there are also problems with adenosine, which contribute to that phenomenon of not feeling as hyper and energetic when you consume coffee or caffeine as somebody with ADHD. However, I'm not going to pretend to understand it because it's way outside my jurisdiction. I've tried to do some research, but I haven't really found a clear answer yet, so I will keep digging. What I can tell you is that the way that caffeine interacts with adenosine in somebody with ADHD is slightly, at least, different from somebody who does not have ADHD. In addition, there are other factors that contribute to the different experience that somebody with ADHD has when consuming caffeine. Let's go back to the dopamine and norepinephrine. Dopamine and norepinephrine are lower than they should be. The levels of dopamine and norepinephrine are lower than they should be in people with ADHD. And what does caffeine do? It raises those levels. So your average Joe, your average person who does not have ADHD, if they drink coffee, they get heightened levels of dopamine, heightened levels of norepinephrine. Since their baseline levels were already fine, they don't have ADHD, they were fine at the baseline. When those levels increase, it might actually make them jittery because it's so high. It might make them anxious if they consume too much caffeine. That's why some people can get all like jittery, bouncing off the walls, anxious. However, in somebody with ADHD, because the levels of those neurotransmitters are lower, it's actually, when you consume caffeine, more likely to just bring up those levels to a normal amount, to an amount that is more comparable to a neurotypical person, which is why people with ADHD might describe feeling more focused, more alert, more calm actually, more able to regulate their emotions. You know, they might have less turbulent emotions when they consume caffeine, because you're taking these less than ideal levels of norepinephrine and dopamine and you're increasing them to what is now more normal than before. You're increasing them to a level that is more comparable to a neurotypical person rather than the lower levels of somebody with ADHD. So all the things that dopamine and norepinephrine help with, like focus, mood, concentration, memory, all the things we talked about at the start of the video, those things are going to be improved. It's going to be easier to focus. You might feel better in terms of your mood with emotional regulation. You might feel more productive. In my case, let me give a little personal anecdote here. I drink coffee every day, and I drink coffee right before filming and streaming, and it high-key carries. Like, okay, yes, I'm unmedicated. Yes, I kind of use coffee in place of medication, but I must say that I feel a lot better. I feel a lot more motivated. I'm able to sit down and actually film. Whereas if I don't have coffee, I just feel so fuzzy. My brain is everywhere. My brain is just like so many conversations going on at once. I can't focus. It's hard for me to shift between tasks. It's hard for me to get out of chilling around the house mode and enter filming mode. But when I drink coffee, when I consume that caffeine, it makes me feel a little bit more calm, a little bit more focused, a little bit more mentally energetic, but not in a jittery way, not in an anxious way. It also makes me calmer and greatly increases my mood. That's one big thing that I've noticed. I really experience the difference in emotional regulation and mood stability. When I consume coffee, sometimes I'll be feeling absolutely shitty in the morning, and then I just get my coffee and I go on a stroll for like 5 minutes outside. I feel like a changed man. I feel like a whole new person. I really feel the effects of caffeine on my mood. And this is just having 1 cup of coffee. Now, yes, I have a cup every day, but I'm not pounding down cups upon cups of coffee. All right, like this effect can be achieved with moderate, safe amounts of caffeine, just mind you. And I guess I'll throw this in here. There is a limit to how much caffeine you should consume per day. Let me look that up. 400 milligrams. I have about 150 milligrams per day, maybe. I don't really know. I have 1 cup of cold brew per day, and sometimes I get a really small one, so not too much. PSA to all caffeine enjoyers, please do not overdo it. Please do not be having 16 cans of Monster per day. You know who you are. Another really interesting thing is I had somebody ask me if this has anything to do with autism, if caffeine interacts with autism in a unique way. And I have not studied that at all, so I will not say shit about it. No idea. But I might look into it sometime. It seems pretty fascinating. I already find this extremely fascinating, and I hope you were able to learn something from this video. I just love sharing information like this. I was talking to my boyfriend. I don't know if he has ADHD or not, but he doesn't feel energetic after drinking coffee. Sometimes he'll actually feel more tired. Is that a coincidence? I don't know. But he certainly doesn't feel more energetic. And I was explaining to him, like, have you ever considered, you know, how ADHD might impact the dopamine levels, blah, 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 everything I just explained in this video. And he's like, oh, damn. Now that I pay attention, I just realized I don't feel energetic, but I do feel way more focused. and I'm able to concentrate on one thing and my mind is more quiet. And I'm like, that's so hype. I love this shit. I love sharing psychological information. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Did I forget to mention anything? I don't think I did. Thanks, Twin. Make sure to be kind to yourself and take care of yourself and follow my Twitch. Okay? Okay. It's so hot in my room, bro. Holy moly. Alright, bye, Twin. Mwah.